Hi everybody, this is Rabbi David Foreman. We're going to be looking at the story of Joseph and his brothers. It occupies really the second half of the book of Genesis. Just as you begin to read the story, it seems to me a few questions jump out at you, and I just want to call attention to them here. Just let's put them on the table. Basically, the questions are, look, what was everybody thinking? Let's start with the brothers. It's not such a nice thing to do, to take your brother and strip him of his clothes and throw him in a pit and sell him as a slave. I mean, that's a really mean thing. That's really not such a nice thing to do. How are we supposed to understand that? What were they thinking? Did they justify that to themselves? Was it just a blind act of jealousy? Did they have some rationale for it? And even if they justified it, even if they hated their brother so much to do such a thing, but still, what about their father? Didn't they love their father? Jacob, how did they think he was going to react to all of this? They ruined his life taking his most favored child, and if they didn't love their brother enough to do this, what about their father? And just how do we understand what it was that the brothers were doing and what it was that they were thinking? So question number one is, what were the brothers thinking when they did all this? Question number two, Joseph. As Joseph is in Egypt, and he sees the brothers, he really torments them. The family is starving, and instead of revealing himself, he goes and he plays with them and sends them back. And more than that, he never even reveals himself to his father. Once he rises to grandeur, he's second in charge of the king. What about sending a postcard back to Dad? Wishing you were here. The weather's beautiful in Egypt. One day come to visit me. Joseph loved his father. His father loved him, even if he didn't care so much about his brothers, even if he was going to torment them. What about his father? And we're not the first ones to ask this question. The Ramban asked this question, Nachmanides, famous medieval commentator. These are serious questions. What were the brothers thinking? What was Joseph thinking? What was Jacob thinking? Why did Jacob, after all of these tensions in the family, choose to send Joseph that day, immediately after he became aware of just how jealous the other brothers were? After Joseph has a second dream, just after that second dream, he just happens to send him off to check on how their brothers are doing in Shechem. It's a dangerous kind of mission. You're sending him alone and unguarded, a long way from home, just when it's the tensions have broken into the open, how much it is that the other brothers hate him. Maybe it's hindsight is 20/20 because we know now what happened to Joseph, but it seems like, was he naive? Was he benighted? Did he not realize that this was at least potentially dangerous mission? Why was he doing that? And I think part of the temptation we have is to look at Jacob and maybe think, oh, he's such a naive guy. He didn't really know what was going on in his family. If only Jacob had known, if only Jacob had been a little bit more aware, maybe this terrible stuff would have happened. So is that view of Jacob as the naive father, unaware of just how deep the tensions run in his family, is that a justified kind of vision of Jacob? And finally, fourth major persona, so to speak, in the story, not person but persona, is God. What does God think of all of this? Do we have any clue? God doesn't react to the sale. It's not like these lightning bolts come down from heaven or anything. And of course, generally in the Bible, God doesn't always react. People do their thing, and we find out in more subtle ways what the divine approach to it all was here. Are there any clues as to what God thinks of all this? What does God think of the brothers' rationale, if there is one, for putting Joseph in the pit? What does God think of what is it Joseph is doing, Jacob is doing? Does this pass by without notice? Does God have better things to do? Is he distracted by something going on in the Andromeda galaxy or something? Or are these major issues, they're major enough to take up the entire second half of the book of Genesis? What is the divine approach? Do we have any clues from the text itself to try to understand how it is that God is seeing things? So I want to kind of frame things with that. What were they thinking? What were the brothers thinking? What was Joseph thinking? What was Jacob thinking? What was God thinking? It's very difficult to go back 3,000 years and try to piece together theories on this, but I do think that we get some clues in the text. I think that if we look carefully at the story as it develops in chapter 37, the text goes out of its way to give us very significant clues about all of these things, and I want to begin to unearth them with you. I want to challenge you to read through chapter 37, be attentive for clues. Do you see any clues as to what they were thinking? Let's start with Jacob. Was he really benighted? Was he really naive? Do we have any clues from the text that would indicate yes, that would indicate no? See what you think. Let's come back and compare notes.